Sean. Thanks so much for doing this.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat.
Absolutely. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about IBD and Crucial.
Included by Design stemmed out of our consulting agency, Universal Access. At Universal Access, we were focused on the built environment, really looking at international design standards, universal design in the built environment, and really trying to remove barriers for people living with disabilities. One thing we found very quickly is the only thing universal about universal design, it's universally different everywhere you go. So imagine how difficult it would then become to identify, a space that could meet your needs if you've never been in that country or you've never been in that city. Because again, it differs even from city to city. And Canada is one of the countries that's lagging behind other countries in this space specifically. Wow. What we wanted to do was grow beyond just physical accessibility and actually use accessibility as a pillar in what we would then start focusing on, which is disability inclusion. And to achieve that, obviously trying to do it where we could scale and create global impact and have a bit of immediacy on the impact that we wanted to create. There's a systemic gap that exists, and in order to account for it, we needed to start in spaces that could allow people to become part of their community very quickly. However, working with those types of businesses, small businesses, service-based industry, their margins are really tight, and there's not a lot you can do charging consulting rates and then expecting them to do major, renovations or construction to accommodate that first pillar, which is that accessibility or universal design element. So we started Included by Design looking at disability inclusion as a whole and really setting up a structure where we could work with businesses and categorically provide a process for them and a solution that accounted for the overall inclusion aspect of people with disabilities. So working with their staff from a training perspective or a policy perspective with their HR, as well as accounting for the structural accommodations that they could create in order to provide an environment for employment or, to service different patrons that they may have visiting, or to be able to just provide a service to, a specific demographic of people that make up over 20% of our population.
Amazing. Then how does Crucial fit into the picture?
Yeah, so Crucial was the first product. So what we wanted to do is, as we were looking at, growing into something that could have a global impact, it was really moving away from traditional consulting services and putting those services out of business by developing digital solutions that could support our clients the same way, have the same impact, but maybe provide a more lean opportunity to do it, fitting into a better, margin for smaller businesses, but also providing a bigger impact for those larger businesses that maybe have to do ESG or DE&I reporting. We can actually quantify the impacts that those businesses are having on an annual basis instead of saying, they're this far away from actually being accessible. We can turn that focus around and say, they've made this much progress over the last year. They were here. Look at all these things they've done to become, this much more accessible. And think about what they'll do next year. Yeah, they haven't gotten it all right in 1 year. As we were talking about small steps versus big leaps, that's unfortunately the way a lot of businesses have to operate. There are, budgetary cycles and, parameters that they have to operate within that prevent them from being able to do everything under the moon. And probably for the best, because they can at least iterate, evolve, and see what works, what doesn't work, make those small mistakes to better serve kind of their employee base, their customers, their clients, and their overall business as a whole. So we developed Crucial kind of as our first pilot product, creating a way for people to identify spaces based off 4 different levels of accessibility that we certify under, utilizing global legislation from multiple countries around the world. So again, if you're in Canada going to Australia and in Canada, a bronze certified space works for you here, it's going to work for you the same there. And you can start becoming a little bit more confident in what your needs look like and whether or not a space would be conducive in meeting those needs. And so that was kind of our primary focus, was really trying to establish a platform that did that. But went a step further. We didn't want to be icons on a map. We wanted to allow an integration of experience and really allow businesses to reach out and interact and engage with this demographic of people, and to also allow for this demographic of people, and their friends and family and anyone else that's in their lives to be able to go onto a platform and really understand whether or not, they can book dinner for them and their grandparents, or they can, book a wedding hall for their wedding and still have their grandparents, their disabled relative, whomever, participate in that at whatever extent, whether or not they're familiar with the specifics of that disability or not. So that was kind of goal number one. We heavily emphasized and focused on the disability community's experience and having those needs met right out of the gate, and then introduced it as a beta here in Calgary back last December.
Cool. Amazing. So what was happening for you in the business that prompted you to reach out to the product traction people?
It was exactly that, the traction of our product. We found, we've done very little marketing. We've done very little advertising about the product. Intentionally, we didn't want to grow either side of the market before we understood its fit and what it was able to do. We saw a lot of organic growth on the user side, but the one-off conversations with the restaurant industry, which was where we kind of honed in on as our initial client base that we wanted to attract. One, it was a blue ocean for us. Again, there wasn't really accessibility consultants that could go in and work under the margins that they were able to kind of afford. As well as when you think community or you think kind of getting out, the first place you really think of is getting out for dinner or going and meeting a friend for a drink. Mm-hmm. They were rocked by COVID. And the one thing that I've spoken to often is people coming out of COVID now have this unique ability to empathize with the challenges isolation have on a person.
Yes.
We can now extrapolate that to, what if that was your entire lifetime? Or what if that was the entire time you were experiencing a disability? You had to live like that. And it's amazing that you now get to come out of isolation, but there's still an entire group of people that aren't. And so that's where we wanted to test and find that space. And we found that, we weren't quite meeting the value of restaurants. Mm-hmm. My immediate thought was, it's got to be our onboarding process. It's not efficient enough. We're still doing it from a manual basis. So let's reach out to the product traction team and get them helping us build this geospatial tool that'll allow restaurateurs and people to scan their business, send us that information, and that'll solve our client side of the problem.
Right.
Thankfully, with the product traction team, they're able to prove that hypothesis wrong.
Right. So what was that like to work with the product traction team and hear that?
So it didn't come right up front. I mean, it was certainly something that we had discovered together, and it really felt like we came to that resolution collectively. It wasn't told to me. It wasn't, brought forward to my attention, but it was working through the processes and working through their map and process to get us to that resolve, to really see where the issues were and kind of step back a little bit from leading with, these are the assumptions made, and for sure we're just going to build based off that, and really look at, okay, well, let's make a couple assumptions. Let's start working from hypothesis and validate whether or not that is in fact the issue. And when we started realizing that wasn't the issue, it was a prioritization of accessibility, and not from a stance of not wanting to become accessible, but just not knowing what could be done and having these false assumptions about what that looked like. And so being able to then look at that and say, well, what if we offered, or what if we started evolving the platform before looking at how we can expedite the process of getting places onto it, but really making sure we're meeting the needs of not only the people living with disabilities, but also the clients that we're going after, and, focusing on a singular client base, meeting their needs exceptionally well. And then we can look at other verticals, hotels, and different industries that are adjacent to the restaurant industry, and start expanding on that platform at the same time as looking how we can mobilize the growth and expansion into new markets across Canada, while working in a single industry and then multiple industries, and kind of utilizing those growth aspects all in one. So it changed my way of thinking completely. Again, going from consulting and knowing a certain space, knowing a lot about one category of accessibility, disability inclusion, and those aspects, and being able to then bring a really strong team of people who knew technology really, really well, which was definitely my blind spot, has been amazing. It was really, it was a massive value add to the way we were pursuing our transition.
That's so cool. So tell me a little bit about what it was actually like to work with the product traction team.
We started off with initially going through the product that we had. They took a lot of time understanding our market, what our intention was, building out a bit of a roadmap so they knew what our value proposition was, what it could be in terms of strengthening it, and then where I wanted our flag at the end, our summit to be, if you will, and what that final product could eventually do, and what it looked like in my mind on how we would get there. And then they worked with us kind of breaking that down a little bit. We would meet at first almost daily, I think, for short cycles. They did a lot of work in the background, but they were really transparent about the work they did, and then what the next steps were looking like, and really helped kind of place that process and roadmap in front of us. So after we were able to go through some of those key pieces of breaking down our product, breaking down kind of that journey and roadmap to kind of its final destination, they were able to start looking at competitive landscapes and how we were differentiating, what the value proposition looked like from an initial standpoint, and then started engaging with our customer interviews, and validating what those new hypotheses were, again, before really pulling the trigger on that development, to make sure not only were we getting the fit on the user side, which we feel pretty confident that was already something that was actualized, but making sure there was that fit for the client side, so that there was a revenue model and a different kind of setup. So proving out price points, proving out value that this platform could have to that demographic of client base, and started kind of ticking off boxes. And it's amazing to see, like, you think one thing, 3 interviews later, it's completely different, and how that completely evolves through it. It was something that was new for us, and really interesting to see, and something we'll certainly keep engaging in as we continue to iterate and grow, is really doing that validation piece first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so now that you've had a little bit of distance and you can reflect on this, how do you think working with the product traction team actually helped you grow your business or helped you move forward?
They built in a lot of systems as we were working along with the product, from marketing to automation, from a sales cycle perspective and a reach out and engagement perspective. They really worked on elements of the business while working on the product as well. So we've been able to structure kind of our sales process, our marketing initiatives and intentions around some of the initial work that they've helped us build out and create. They're really bought into what we do. They have a passion behind it and, want to see it succeed. And so we found that they were just really engaged, really tied to what they did beyond just simply building a mechanism, beyond just creating a product and handing it off to us and saying, here it is, here's what you've asked us to build, best of luck. They really took it that step further, making sure not only were we building the right product, but we knew what to do with it after it was, completed and developed.
Absolutely. Okay, so now you've had this experience with the product traction team. Would you feel comfortable recommending them to another growing business?
So we have, sorry about that. I've got a baby in the other room.
No problem.
So we're actually just getting into the product development portion of it. But with the amount of confidence that I have going into it, without a doubt, I would completely recommend anybody that was going through this process to go through it with a team that can help you with the initial stuff as well. And really, again, get into a product development team that isn't just going to build you the tool you're asking for, but really take you through a process of validating it, not just for the best sake of the product, but for yourself. And so you can feel confident that you are in fact building the right thing, especially when money's tight at first. You don't have something that's generating revenue. You don't have something that you can, utilize revenues for, or you can go out and raise money on because you've had all this accelerated growth behind it. They really make sure your money's being spent in the best way. And I wouldn't hesitate if anyone asked.
Wonderful. Sean, thank you so much for this conversation. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.